Hey everyone, thank you for joining me for today's video. My name is Gage Edwards, here again with another interview with one of Waste 360's 40 Under 40 winners. Today I am joined by Charlotte Dreizen, Director of Sustainability and Environment at Plastics Industry Association. Now, you may have already encountered some of Charlotte's sage advice on recycling if you've been in that corner of Twitter over the last year, because she is always on there sharing helpful information and answering questions on the do's and don'ts of recycling. Charlotte hails from New York City, where growing up she didn't anticipate being in the waste industry, but jokingly she says she shouldn't be surprised after having to leapfrog over trash and recycling in the streets. After seeing various things come through recycling machines like large kitchen knives, concrete blocks, and even desk chairs, Charlotte believes one thing that we don't do well enough is properly educating folks on recycling. So check out Charlotte's thoughts on winning a 40 Under 40 award, as well as more thoughts on the industry and recycling in this full interview. Charlotte, first off, let me ask you, let's go over a quick rundown about who you are and maybe what is your story and how you got here.
Absolutely. I'd be thrilled to retrace. I'm from New York City originally, and I've got to say, I never imagined getting into the world of waste and sustainable materials, but I suppose it shouldn't have been a surprise having to leapfrog over giant bags of trash and recycling all over the streets in New York. But after going to school, I found my way into the world of sustainable packaging and helped companies design recyclable packaging and compostable packaging, since a lot of folks don't necessarily understand how those systems works when they're creating products to work in those channels. And after doing that and supporting the private sector on that side, I kind of went on the other side of the coin and supported public recycling programs, working for the DC government and running recycling programs for them, both on the residential side as well as the commercial and multifamily side, which was like whiplash, going from really nuanced technical considerations, working with engineers on packaging and talking about recyclability, to the really big, wild challenges of how to manage physically millions of pounds of material. So that was a real pleasure to kind of see both sides of the angle. And since then, I've had the great pleasure of joining Plastics Industry Association as a Director of Sustainability and Environment, where I lead our work around plastic waste in the environment and helping companies ensure that they can prevent any loss of plastic in their operations.
Well, it seems like you're very passionate about what you're doing and the work that's going on, and recycling especially. If anyone follows you on Twitter, for sure they would know. Where does this passion for recycling come from? What was the spark?
It's a good question, and I would so second that. I think it is the most fascinating industry to be a part of, and I'm really grateful to be in it, and really also, I think, enthusiastic about how excited people are in general. I think that's where my passion and enthusiasm comes from, to be honest, is that I think so many people are interested in where their waste goes once they produce it and put it into a bin, regardless of what kind of bin that is. And I think I'll fully admit that I think I nerd out on all the technical and scientific side of things as well. So I think it's a really cool position to be in, to try my best to understand how it all works behind the scene and help communicate that in a really clear, digestible way to folks. And whether that's in community meetings in DC or, exactly as you pointed out, online on Twitter, it's been so much fun to interact with folks there and get a sense of what confuses them and what their questions are. And a lot of times it's just helping point people in the right direction of, this item that I just finished in my fridge, what should I do with it? And kind of as simple as that.
Excellent. Now let's talk a little bit, I guess, community then. How can we be doing better as a community when it comes to recycling? Like, what is holding us back, do you think?
It's such a good question. And I think it's one that I appreciate there's so much interest in, at least for me. It palpably feels that even in the last 3, 4, 5 years, there's been a big groundswell of interest and folks wanting to better understand how they can make a personal impact. To me, I think one of the biggest, most important things for folks to think about is that if you're not sure if something should be in a recycling bin, to err on the side of caution and don't put it in there. I think, we in the waste world often call this wish cycling, that when someone wants to do their best and recycle as much as possible and errs on the side of, the system will sort it out. If it's not genuinely recyclable, that's no problem, no harm. But in actuality, contamination is a really big challenge for the recycling system and adds cost to the recycling system. It adds complication to equipment. Sometimes contamination can harm or physically damage equipment, and not only equipment, of course, but workers in the recycling system and in the waste system as a whole. And that can be anything from, gosh, my first time at a material recovery facility when I was working for DC government, we had a big like kitchen knife come down the pike, and not something that can be recycled, and it would be really tough for a worker to kind of reach on in and pull that out. A few minutes later, a big block of concrete, that's not something that can be recycled, and unfortunately can be really heavy and damage both equipment or folks who are trying to make sure that nothing's getting past them and into the system that shouldn't be.
Do you think that counts as like maybe your biggest pet peeve when it comes to recycling? Maybe the lack of education, or the I guess the unknown of like, oh, I'll just I guess this can be recycled. I'll throw it in there. Or is there something else that's on your mind that you think like this is the biggest problem I have personally with recycling and people doing it?
Yeah, I think it's some combination thereof. I think that's a big one. And I think that it's so well intentioned that I think I'm cautiously optimistic that all of that interest in wish cycling can be better channeled into a productive direction with more education. And that's a tough thing. I mean, as many folks in many different cities work to provide better education, the kind of national standard for what good education looks like and costs is about $2 a household. And that's expensive. In DC, for example, we have about 100,000 households in single family homes that the city picks up material from directly. And they're able to just make that threshold of spending about $200,000 a year to educate on recycling. But we have twice that many households in multifamily. And unfortunately, there hasn't yet been able to be that investment in education for that demographic and that sector. And that's very similar in a lot of cities. And unfortunately, as our populations grow, they'll especially be in those multifamily buildings and demographics often. So we know that that biggest area of growth is one that we're not doing as good of a job of servicing for recycling education. But we also know that we frankly don't do a good enough job of providing access at a really simple level to that sector as well. I think that less than 1 in 4 multifamily households has access to recycling at the same level that they do trash, which is really wild. I mean, when we think about our national recycling rate, that's, I think, a big reason why the residential recycling system isn't necessarily collecting as much material as we would want, because in a lot of communities, you have recycling automatically provided to single family homes, and then multifamily is a real crapshoot about whether they have recycling access or not.
Now, before we, I guess, move off of this topic, you mentioned the kitchen knife, the concrete. Is there anything you've seen come through recycling that you thought is just has flabbergasted you? That like, I can't believe this is here, or maybe even asked you on Twitter, like, why would somebody ask me that this is a recyclable thing?
Oh yeah, so many. This is maybe my favorite question ever to think about. I would say that in the recycling system, I've seen, desk chairs come through DC's facilities, or sofas, or, like furniture and stuff that really feels pretty outside of the realm of what I would hope folks are putting in their bin. And on Twitter, I've got to say, a lot of people, I think, misunderstand how our recycling system is able to sort material, and often thinks, kind of purely about the type of material something is made of. And that tends to lead to some interesting questions. Like, for example, we have to have at least all material be above 2 inches by 2 inches to effectively sort it in curbside recycling systems. And, someone might think of, might reach out and say, I have 2,000 pounds of shredded paper. Can I just throw that into my bin? And unfortunately, even though paper is a recyclable material, not something that the system can sort. And the same goes for, I get questions every once in a while about, I have a big pile of wood. Can that be recycled? Because I think people think paper trees. Or, like a metal golf club, and we can recycle lots of metal items, but not something that's, the shape and size of it. So I think one of the things that I am so excited about doing with folks on Twitter and elsewhere is trying to explain the why behind things, because I think it can feel a little arbitrary that, why can I recycle a aluminum soda can, but not a golf club, if you don't understand how that sorting works in the system, or why we can recycle rigid plastic containers in curbside systems, but have a tougher time with plastic film. So I think that is one of the pieces that I think can really help empower people to stop feeling like it's so arbitrary, and really understanding the why and the how behind the scenes.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense too. When I ask this a lot for, I guess, about recycling, like what is kind of holding us back, a lot of people say education. So that kind of falls under that umbrella. Like, people just need to know how it works in their community and what can be recycled, so they're not just like holding up the works everywhere. Let's move on out of that. Let's talk about the 40 under 40 award specifically. How was it for you to find out that you were a recipient?
So humbling. I've got to say, I have been the biggest fan and consumer of all things Waste 360 ever since my very first days interning in the space at an organization. And it's one of the things that I've always so looked forward to every year, to see such a huge diversity of folks in the space who are doing really interesting and innovative things. And to be considered one of those this year in the awards was really really overwhelmingly flattering, and I'm really grateful to be included. I am among really amazing company and have had such a great time getting to know some of those folks who have also received the award this time around, and learning about not only the work they do, but their companies and initiatives. And it's such a full spectrum of folks, and folks who are working on really cool startup and pilot ideas, all the way to folks at really big established multinational companies who have such big scope and influence.
Did you ever think that, I guess, having that spark for recycling and wanting to see that through would lead you to an award for it?
I don't think I had ever thought about it. I think that it feels, one of the things that I think is, there's a trade-off with in the space for recycling, is that, I spend almost every waking minute thinking about it. I can't go to the grocery store or go to the pharmacy without checking out packaging and like flipping it over to see the resin identification code when I'm waiting in line. And I think it sometimes feels like you're a very small drop in the bucket. And I know that there's a lot of folks who similarly are putting a lot of time and energy and effort into the space. So it's not something I definitely had on my radar by any means, but it definitely is all the more, I think, accelerating my interest and passion, and making sure I'm doing the best I can to make a positive impact.
I think you're doing great at that. I see it. I follow you on Twitter, so I see it all the time, the questions that come through. Well,
Much appreciated.
I appreciate the time. Congratulations on the 40 Under 40 award. Is there anything that you'd like to throw at me that you want to mention, so maybe that our readers can look at, our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely say that I really appreciate, I think, folks who are interested in recycling and waste, who are able to take a bit of time here and there to learn more about not only their system and the community that they live in, and how recycling and trash works there, but also the companies that they buy products from and support. I think voting with your dollars is such an important piece of the equation. And to start learning about the companies who are making products that you use and love, and supporting those companies who are using recycled content and using innovative materials and bio-based materials. And I think there are so many different ways that people can really sink their teeth into their kind of broader constellation of companies that they not only maybe interface and support with on a day-to-day basis, but buy from occasionally. I think that's a really powerful way that folks can also make some impact there, not only once they're ready to recycle or dispose of a container in their kitchen.
Well, excellent. I also implore anyone listening to this just to go follow you on Twitter as well, just to get a little extra information here and there when they're scrolling through their timelines between all the other stuff that's going on. So.
Oh, much appreciated. It's been a blast there. I would be so thrilled to chat and answer any questions that folks have. It's a blast to chat with folks on Twitter. So please feel free. I'm at Charlotte Dreizen, CHARDREIZEN, if anyone else is out there.
Hey, thanks for watching. You can check out more interviews just like this one with our other 40 Under 40 award winners at waste360.com. As always, be sure to stay tuned to waste360.com for all the latest news on the waste industry.